Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am just going to wait a minute or less just to let folks join. But all right, yeah, let's just kick off because we're already 2 minutes after the hour. So my name is Leo. I will be your host today at a Datafold Cloud Demo Day. So we run these every few weeks. Just want to get a chance to talk to people about what we're up to, what's new as part of Datafold, and who we are. Maybe introduce ourselves for the first time. Um, and I think to get things started, I would love for anyone who's in the chat to share a bit of an intro, maybe your name. I guess that'll just appear, where you are, and how about this? Uh, how about your favorite animal that you have seen in your neighborhood? Okay, and I will go with the common Oregonian squirrel because I just saw one walk by outside my window. So your name, your location, and your favorite local animal. Um, and I also want to introduce in the chat my colleague Elliot. So he will be moderating in case things get too rowdy, or potentially sharing useful links or information or answering any questions I'm not able to address live. All right, enough banter and the intro. I'll definitely keep my eye on the chat as you all type your intros. I'll appreciate that. All right, Michigan, and you've got a groundhog. Thank you, John, for introducing yourself. Great to have you here. I'll call out others as they introduce themselves, so don't hesitate, don't be shy. But let's jump in. Hi there, Elliot. Datafold is a data quality platform. I've worked at Datafold for a couple of years now. I joined because I was working on a data team and I found the tooling really lacking for preventing data quality issues that sometimes I caused, sometimes upstream teams caused, and it seemed like a problem that could be solved through technology, at least partially. I wanted to have all the tools at my disposal, and I got really interested in Datafold because we were doing some really unique things in the space, which I'll get into, and wanted to join the team. Israel, welcome. And I will have to look at that Wikipedia article later. Fascinating. A small monkey. So, what problems do we address? I'll try not to be so distracted by the chat. I won't try too hard though. So keep the intros coming. So data quality is found too late. That kind of alludes to what I just mentioned. I was working on a data team, and if I caused an issue or if a teammate caused an issue, I wanted to know right away before a CEO or a customer came to us and said this doesn't look right. Even if we were all focused entirely on testing, we weren't necessarily taking the same approach. And so standardization and automation is a key piece of what we do to enable velocity. And finally, all of these issues, if they're handled correctly, lead to a high trust, high value data team. And of course, the inverse of that is low trust, low perceived value. And I would be remiss if I did not mention low quality of life on the part of the data practitioners, although that might be a problem we feel personally less of a priority for the CEO, but hopefully not. And Berte, welcome from Williamsburg. Okay, so the independent Brooklyn artist I counter daily. Fascinating. All right, well, I hope you're an appreciator of art and enjoying the art scene in Brooklyn. I love Brooklyn actually. Okay, moving right along. So Datafold, we have, I talked about the problems we solved. A couple of the tools we have to address them is a CI/CD integration. So you might be familiar with the idea of these automated tests to catch errors before a deployment is pushed and data is actually impacted. Data monitoring and observability, that is really designed to catch issues that may be in production, but as soon as possible. And so you can think of CI/CD as the furthest left, most proactive, and kind of the best case scenario. You catch an issue before you ship it. Data monitoring and observability, we know that not everything is going to be caught. Things can slip through. The darndest things happen in production. based on incoming data that there's, really no way to test for. And so that's why we have a full observability suite. And then finally, if you've ever been involved in a data migration, you might have wished that it went faster and was more successful. I personally have seen migrations that never end, or that, they're almost done, and the technology you're migrating to has become obsolete. Really nightmare scenarios. Budget overruns, you name it. Maybe you all have a horror story or a success story about a migration. Maybe you are planning a migration right now, or you're in the midst of one. And I'll talk a bit about how our data diffing technology, combined with some fancy new AI features that we've integrated into the platform, can really accelerate that work. And here is a list of logos of some of our customers. So I'll let you bask in that for 3, 2, okay. And this is a very detailed chart, which I will just kind of gesture at. You're not expected to, absorb all of this, but the basic idea is Datafold is everywhere. No, the basic idea is that we do work into all different parts of your pipelines and workflows. So I mentioned CI/CD testing. You can see that kind of at the bottom. You can see my mouse there. Data transformation, that is another piece of where CI/CD would fit in, as well as you can see kind of moving from the bronze to silver to gold layers if you have a medallion architecture. Comparing data between two different environments is kind of a key theme you'll hear recurring, and that is what we do using a data diff. So that's another thing that I'll be getting into detail on, and that is a key piece of our technology that, again, kind of brought me to Datafold when I said, oh, we really should be comparing the before and after of the data, just like a Git diff, or compare between staging and production before we merge the code. Up here, you can see your kind of upstream production databases. So your, your application database or your system of record that gets moved into maybe Snowflake, Databricks, or a similar warehouse. And so again, we can compare between the upstream and the downstream to make sure that the data matches, or to detect any data quality issue, whether that is a business logic check or something like a not null check, and so on. And finally, we can provide full column level lineage all the way down into BI apps like HighTouch, Looker, Tableau, Power BI, and ensure that whether your data is going into a Slack notification or a customer message or channel or an ML or AI application, that it's meeting all of your tests that you have in place. Okay, so I'll just quickly walk through these high-level themes, and then I'll jump into a demo. But again, we have CI/CD testing, so that essentially is where Datafold will write the results of an automated test into GitHub or GitLab or Azure DevOps or any of those tools. And we'll show you comparing between production and staging. So using the code that you're submitting for review and the data that's actually in production, are you going to introduce a regression? And you can start to see here that it's kind of small there, but there's that value level comparison. So you've got your primary key, and then you're comparing between two versions of the data, test versus main, or production versus staging, whatever you want to call it. But the point is you're lining up two versions of the data and finding every single difference. Monitoring and observability, I mentioned that is what we have in production. That is what we have for making sure that anything that slipped through, about right away. So you can see here we've got either automatic anomaly detection, and that's where you see those bands on the screen right now with seasonality baked in. So if you have like weekends or holidays, those aren't going to set off any alarms. And overall, we kind of tell you what is anomalous based on a sensitivity that you've set. So it's just like a drag and drop. I want this more or less sensitive. I want more or less alerts, and that sort of thing. I see Elliot's typing, so I'll let you finish typing before I jump in if needed at all. And I'll get into, here's a list of them, but I'll walk through each of these monitor types. Basically, we validate between business logic checks, as I mentioned, will tell you if schemas are breaking upstream, so unexpected changes that could break your downstream data. SQL metrics, so that would be like any value that is calculated over time that could go up or down based on either metadata like row count or an actual calculated like average value. Could be grouped by different countries or states. There's a number of features there we've built out in response to customer needs. And then finally, data diff monitoring. That would be tracking data from upstream to downstream. Again, making sure your data in your transactional system of record, like Postgres or Oracle, matches what's actually ingested into the data warehouse, rather than just kind of hoping that it got there. And we also see people setting up that same kind of ongoing reconciliation between different instances of BigQuery, for example, between different environments like gold and silver, or medallion architecture, where you want to make sure that all the primary keys exist, even if some of the some of the data is cleaned, you still want all the rows to still exist, and that sort of thing. So hopefully you can start to imagine some of those data diffing use cases. I'll just quickly go through as far as the observability and monitors. We do have a number of out-of-the-box metric monitors. So you can see a few of those right there. We're building out more on an ongoing basis. So fill rate is quite popular, where people basically want to see that none of the values are null, and they want to be alerted. Now you could have other tools that check for not null. The idea here is that we are doing this as part of a unified platform. It's disaggregated from any of your other orchestrations. So like your Airflow or your dbt jobs, you don't need to wait for those to run to know if an anomaly is occurring. And those are just a few out of the box, but you can also wrap your own or write your own custom metrics. Data test, I mentioned a business logic check, but I think the visual is really helpful, where we basically can see here that these are records where the amount is less than or equal to 0, right? So that's the logic that's been written. And then if any records violate that logic, then you'll be notified via Slack or email, and by the way, all of these are notification. If a monitor is triggered, you'll get sent something, right? So I'm saying that now, but I should have said it at the beginning. That's kind of a standard way how these monitors work, is you create them. If an alert goes off, then you'll get that notification wherever you've configured it to be sent. And in this case, the notification has been configured to be sent if the amount column has a value less than 0 now, or equal to 0. Now, I want to just call out, because this is something that sometimes I get the question, like, what's the difference between a data test and a metric monitor? Well, this line and the points on this line are, I think of it as these are aggregate statistics, right? So this is about the whole table or the whole column. It could be the average value, it could be the number of rows, it could be the number of rows that meet a certain condition, like not null. Whereas a data test monitor is checking every single value to see if it meets a certain condition. So it's just two different use cases. Usually people set up some of both. Schema change, kind of the easiest one to explain. We just tell you if the schema changes. And so that, even though it's so simple, to me, that has been maybe the most valuable, at least in my past work on a data team, where I really wanted to know if like an upstream production database dropped a column that we were depending on when we were calculating analytics, or even if the data type changed. So I'm sure some of you at least may be able to relate to that, that root cause of data going down. We do allow you to manage all of this by code. So you can click around in the app and create, monitor after monitor. And if you only want to create one or two, then that's probably your best bet. But you can create a simple code repo, hook that up to Datafold. Everything will be updated automatically when you update the repo using like GitHub Action or something similar. The updated code is sent over to Datafold, and then all your monitors are updated. So that is definitely something to use if you are going to create hundreds or more of monitors. Great, so I'm getting close to where I just want to jump into the tool and walk through a couple of examples. But I would love to hear any questions you have about what I've talked through so far. And I can, you can interrupt me. Elliot can answer, and just anything more you can share or ask will help me, make this more relevant to you. So column level lineage, I'll just keep going though. Column level lineage is, we're going to get into a couple of areas where it kind of undergirds a lot of the rest of the product. So, you have monitoring and observability to catch data as early upstream as possible. Well, you can use column level lineage to figure out where a critical column actually comes from, and what are the potential upstreams that you might want to monitor. Similarly, you can use it to determine if there are any downstreams in your BI apps or other tables that might be impacted by an existing data incident. And we bake that into the tool, so you don't have to dig around the graph to get those answers. So cross-database reconciliation, and I see Mike has a question about that right now. Yeah, so I can address that in part, Mike. But let me just first lay out. One of the unique technologies that Datafold offers is the ability to actually diff between databases. So a lot of what I've talked about and like the ability to diff within Snowflake, we offer automation, consistency, and kind of built into your workflow. But at the end of the day, it is a SQL statement that we send over. And on the other hand, if you're diffing between Snowflake and Postgres, then we will, we do something much more complex, which is more of a proprietary tech that isn't just like a simple SQL statement. So that is part of our special sauce, and it has unlocked a lot of core use cases for customers around reconciling upstream to downstream, as well as validating migrations. So a couple of questions. Looks like Bertay, you're still typing, so I'll wait on that. For cross-database diffing, we do have a few options, and Elliot, if I miss anything, please add. For avoiding load on production database, first of all, we always recommend that you give Datafold a dedicated user and role, and limit our activities that way. We also, you can, depending on what you're trying to do, it often makes sense to add a filter to your diff. Like if you want to only look at the most recent rows that are, that are being ingested or sent to a downstream. We also support sampling. So that would be a way of kind of limiting the amount of, warehouse spend or resource consumption on the database. And yeah, Elliot's got the full manifesto there. So definitely encourage you to click on that link. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that there is the ability to add limits to cross-database diffs so that we essentially stop diffing if there's a certain amount of egress, so rows traveling over the network, or a certain amount of differences found. So something that really unlocked a use case for an early customer was implementing a diff limit. So I mentioned limits, right? There's the egress limit. There's also this diff limit where if you find more than 100 or 1,000, whatever you want to say, differences in a given column or in any column, then we will stop diffing. We'll notify you that we've reached that limit. And often that kind of accomplishes what is needed. And then of course you can always restart the diff if you want to like dig deeper. But in most cases, if you're monitoring a production database, you just want to know if anything is wrong. And so the final thing I'll say is that you can also just remove all the other columns and only diff the PK column. Often that is what people care most about, is they just want to make sure the rows got there. So I hope that addressed some of your question, Mike, and let me go on. So I think I'm going to think this is just some more general stuff that I'm going to skip through. Yeah, I already talked about shifting left. I think you all probably know about that. Okay, let me just do a quick pause, and I'm going to get to a little bit of a demo. All right, so first place I want to go. I think we're actually, it would be helpful if, you know, it sounds like, all right, I'll see what Berthe has to ask, and that is along the lines of what I was about to say. It would be great if you all could actually tell me what you're most interested in from what I've walked through. Excuse me. Because then I can spend more time on that stuff. So could you elaborate on legacy to new platform? Sources mainstream and target is a new Oracle app. Yes. So we certainly can support. I'd be curious. I mean, it does always kind of depend on like what the mainframe infrastructure is. So I'm guessing SQL Server. But Berthe, please correct me if there's like a specific tech. But what you are asking about is exactly what our Datafold migration agent, affectionately known as DMA, can support. And so I'm going to walk through that right now, actually, before I go through the demo, because the demo, to be honest, it's you know, it's our live app, but it's going to essentially show you some of what we've already talked through. Not to mapping between completely different data models. Okay. Yeah, not to undersell the demo, but I want to kind of get to some of this net new content as well. So yeah, so it does certainly depend on what you're trying to do, but basically what we can do to automate a data migration, and this is where our migration agent, which is an LLM driven tool to automate your migration, will come into play. So the basic assumption we would have is that you have a number of SQL scripts that are running on a regular basis. You're moving to a new technology or a new database, and you want to validate that the new SQL that will be running on the new database and the new database itself will be generating data that is what you would expect. So there are a few approaches you can have, and I'm going to talk more generally, and then Berthe, I'll try to address something that you brought up. Yep. So basically, we convert, we validate, we automate. We take your legacy SQL scripts, we turn them into new SQL scripts. Now, a lot of companies are doing a lot, or saying they'll do a lot with AI these days, as you, I'm sure, know. What I find exciting about what we're doing with AI is we are actually validating the output of the AI based on data diffing, which is our core technology that we've been building and putting out there for people to use, for years. So there's a lot of trust in that technology, whereas AI is, of course, new, and people are willing to try it, but we're aware that it could have errors, right? And so the whole idea of Datafold's migration agent is we take your SQL scripts, we use AI to convert them to the new database, and then we automatically use data diffing to validate that the conversion was successful. Now, yeah, so let me see what else I can talk about here. Cross-database reconciliation, that's basically what we talked about, but this is a little bit more of a view into what a data diff looks like, where we're lining up the primary keys, matching, or like identifying differences between values that don't match, and notifying you of that. Now, in the context of the Datafold migration agent, what we will do is we will then feed these diff results back to the LLM and iterate, create a new version of the updated SQL script and generate new data. And we'll continue this process until it matches fully. So essentially, LLM does its thing. We get an output. Maybe it's 90% correct. And John, maybe I'm answering this right now, but I'll just finish my statement and then see if I can help further. And then we run data diffs between the old and the new, right? The current data, the legacy data, and what we've kind of created as a mock new data environment. We see if our conversion based on the LLM was successful. And if it wasn't, then we know exactly how it wasn't because we've done data diffs to compare, and then we feed that information back to the LLM and we iterate until it is successful. So cross-database diffing, yeah, John, I mean, let me know if I can clarify further, but I think the idea is cross-database diffing is used to validate and inform the AI process. And then if, if it matches exactly based on the cross-database diff, then we're able to say the process is complete. If it's not, then we have a new set of data inputs to tell the AI, you missed this, and so do it again. And this is just a bit of a benchmark. Take it with a grain of salt because, like all benchmarks, it depends highly on your environment, but hopefully it gives you at least a sense for scale. Okay, so now Burte, you did have a question about, I think it was mapping between completely different data models. So if you're changing the structure of the data substantially, we do need some form of input to compare to or to validate. I mean, we could still convert the scripts, or we could still use our algorithm to kind of review the scripts, but I don't think that we could, we wouldn't be able to do that sort of iterative diffing process if it was expected that the data was going to change. And so probably the best bet would be to exclude those models from the comparison. At least the simplest option is to exclude those models from the comparison. Compare the most upstream models, not necessarily if you're changing the business logic of like something very downstream. The whole idea here is that we are trying to automate something that is, potentially, as I was kind of alluding to at the beginning of this session, a very expensive and lengthy process. And so at the end of the day, we're not selling, that you press a button and then like 10 minutes later, your migration is done. But we're talking to people who are, in amidst very lengthy migration processes, and their timelines are running out. And so we can say we're going to take this migration from, 6 months to 2 weeks. That would be the idea, or whatever your timeline is, and then hopefully that that gives you the value that you're looking for. While granted, there will be some aspects that we need to go back and forth and say, we want you to review this output with like plenty of time before this deadline, right? So that's kind of the way we structure these typically. On the conversion piece, how do they manage complex data structures? Table valued parameters. I'm not sure what a table valued parameter is, to be perfectly honest. By complex data structure, are you talking about like non-relational data or like complex JSON in a data column? That would be helpful, Israel, if you could clarify, or maybe it's something I'm missing. In general, the overall principle is, I think, would still apply. We have script, you provide us with legacy scripts and the data outputs, and then we would just need to have a way of connecting new scripts to the same source data and generating those same like outputs that we expect to match. If there's a specific case you think that wouldn't cover, then I definitely, and I can follow up later or after if that makes more sense. So while you're typing, because I see you're typing, I do want to hear what you clarify. John, the difference between AI-driven SQL translation and what DMA does. So I would say, think of it this way. I'm probably oversimplifying and underselling, but we are doing AI-driven SQL translation And then we are validating the output of the translated SQL using our core technology data diff to compare the output of the translated SQL to the legacy data. And then if that output does not match exactly, then we repeat the process. We feed in the findings, we rerun the translation, and then we compare the output again. So if you have, like, just to take a simple example, if you had like a SQL translator on Google and you put all of your SQL scripts into it, where does the, I'll just finish this sentence and then try to clarify. If you put all your SQL scripts into it, um, then you would not have any way of validating that the output was correct. John, where does the DMA come in? So DMA, yeah, I would definitely start with the FAQ that Elliot sent. I mean, DMA is just the name of the tool that kind of pulls, that I'm describing, that pulls all this together, right? So yeah, I think you might be asking more specifically about like how the technology works, how the LLM agent is built in. I don't think I have that level of detail here. I'm just going to, not to deflect too much, but just going back to this slide, the basic idea is that we are that the agent is what is doing the translation, and then also receiving the output of the data diff, right? So the data diff isn't the agent itself. Or I think we've just basically been thinking about this whole process as the Datafold migration agent. So there may be like a more technical definition of agent here that I'm missing and not explaining like in the way that you're asking the question. So hope you can bear with me there. Definitely check out the FAQ, and we can certainly follow up if you want to get on the line with a technical stakeholder who can go a little bit deeper than I can, although I like to think I'm reasonably technical. But yeah, no, I appreciate you following along there. And I do think that once we talk about it a bit more, maybe in your, in your context, then that will help it click a bit more. I thought there was one more question that went by. Oh yeah, so Israel, you were just asking about some DBs support particular data structures and others do not. That is a good question. Okay, so translating between data structures, that would definitely be something where we would need to, I think the reality is that would be not an edge case, but not the majority of cases. So we already have built in like, um, well, let me back up. Whenever you're doing a cross database diff, you're going to run into type mismatches, just because every single database handles nearly every data type differently. And so we handle most of those out of the box. We do sensible conversions or translations, because if we didn't, then you would just get like an onslaught of type mismatch alerts or errors. In cases where that's not possible, or the answer is not obvious, then we do have a human in the loop to kind of validate, and we would work with you. And that's why I say this would be like a kind of deeper engagement. It's not a product where you press a button and the results are just sent back to you in the mail, and then that's that, right? We would identify those potential mismatches that could not be handled out of the box, and work with you on finding a good solution, because ultimately we're enabling a migration that does involve some of those design choices. So I know I'm very grateful for all the questions, very sincerely, and I think you should keep them coming, but I am going to just do a little bit of demoing, a little bit less than I was expecting, which is totally fine. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things in terms of monitors and diffing in general, okay? So basically we have here a Datafold monitor that, let's see what we have here. It fires every day. And this is just the main page of the monitor, and it shows you the status at the time of the run and the number of groups that triggered these alerts. And then up here you have the main status. So if you go back, you can actually see all of your monitors and all of their current statuses, right? So you've got a nice mixture here in our demo instance of diff monitors, metrics monitors, and I'll show you a couple more examples. But just going back to this one that I was walking through, expand this and you can actually see every single value for every single group. And what we're counting here is page views per country. And then this, hopefully you can start to see how this corresponds to the metric that's calculated. So as I said earlier, a metric monitor is a single value that's calculated repeatedly over time. And then you've got our automatic anomaly detection, which will let you know if something starts to be out of range. That is all set up very, you know, well, I say simple. I happen to pull up one that involves custom SQL. You will want to write custom SQL if you're doing any kind of group by. In this case, it's a little more complex than, all you really need to do is group by the group and then that'll do it. But anyway, the point is you can write any custom SQL to generate data that supports these monitors. The anomaly detection you only need to configure once. There's a simple sensitivity bar, which you can drag up and down and kind of test to see where you will see alerts or like how many alerts you will see. And then, of course, you can set up a schedule and a notification to Slack, PagerDuty, or any other. And so that is a metric monitor. I'm moving a little bit quickly just so that I can touch on some more of these. A data test monitor. So you kind of saw the price below zero monitor that I showed you earlier. In this case, we're looking at a test for email syntax, right? So this is, I know this looks complex, but I think most of you on the call can recognize this as regex. That, speaking of AI, you could, generate your regex and then essentially test for any email syntax that did not match. And so you can see here, if there was a failed test, you would be able to view the results. Here's that failed email syntax, download as CSV. You would be notified by Slack or PagerDuty or email, and this CSV would also be downloadable from that send. And that is a data test monitor. Now, the only two I've shown you so far have require you to write SQL. That is kind of my error in that that's generally not necessary for a monitor. So you can see here, there's a couple of out-of-the-box monitor types. In this case, you're only seeing freshness and row count because this is a table monitor. So we're monitoring a value about the entire table, in this case, row count. So again, the common theme here, and so that's one of the two table monitor metrics, but I do also want to just highlight that if you click on let's find another table and I'll select column metric type, I'll select a table, and then you can kind of see the various metric types that are supported for different types of columns. So this is cardinality, uniqueness, fill rate, and if I select a numeric, you'd see all of these numeric calculations also. Let me check the chat. The chat's so quiet. All right, I hope you guys have some questions about some of this monitoring capability. Also, I want to scroll up because I think I missed a comment where, yeah, Mike said you're interested in cross-database diffing, so hopefully I covered that. And running diffs as CI/CD, great. So let me definitely jump into CI/CD. And then I think that hopefully starts to cover what I was looking to. All right, I'll just pull up a pull request. All right, so jumping around a bit here, but I'm glad I noticed that note, Mike, because this is one of the pillars of what we do. More of our kind of tried and true bread and butter use case than the exciting migration automation stuff. But this has been, this is truly what brought me into Datafold and what is the majority of our customers use. So whether or not you use DBT, you can automate the evaluation of your code change before merging to production. So essentially, what that means is when you open a pull request, like this one you see here, so you could imagine this is Airflow code, DBT code, Dagster, um, uh, stored procedures, custom SQL scripts, whatever you may use to manage your analytics code. When you open a pull request, instead of looking at the code and kind of saying, oh, okay, I can see how that might update the data. I think that matches my logic, but Datafold makes it incredibly, scroll down to the latest comment, incredibly clear what the impact will be on the data. So we analyze the difference between the two code bases, the two branches of your pull request, and then we tell you what primary keys are missing or added, as well as what columns contain differing values. So finally, at last, we can get into a data diff here. The exciting thing to me, by the way, is I used to do these demos and I would start with the data diff and I would say, all right, you all know what a data diff is, right? Because that's going to be like the main thing that we talk about right now. It's actually not so much the case now because we have so many other, so many other things going on with the technology. But here we are, the tried and true data diff, primary key, production data versus staging. So this would be the way to make it much easier for you to do a thorough code review of your analytics code update that you have opened a pull request for. So there's a couple things I want to highlight here while I'm in here. If you click on downstream impact, that brings us to lineage. Okay, so I know this looks like just a list. This is your tabular view of lineage, which is usually a good place to start when you're looking at a pull request. But the idea is you have a couple of columns with data differences, and you can click through and see how they impact downstreams, if at all. So that one didn't have much impact on downstreams, but this one does have a large impact on downstreams. So if there are like many, many downstreams, you can easily kind of just scroll to the bottom and see where the dashboards, what's going to be impacted, or you can explore that within this lineage UX. So of course you've got column level lineage, but the idea here is that it connects to your BI apps. So here we've got Power BI. That's hot off the press, so fun for me to see. Didn't actually know that would pop up in this demo. You've got Tableau, you've got Looker. I don't see high touch here, but we would have any high touch syncs. And then the idea is that we're not just showing you a graph of lineage, but we're actually connecting it to the data diff results so that then you can go back to your pull request and say, okay, I think I understand there are these differences. This is where the impact would be seen. And then that lineage, essentially this is like a portal to our overall data explorer, right? So we're integrating the data explorer and lineage into the diff results and the pull request analysis. So that'll show up in any diff results, but it's particularly relevant if you've opened a pull request and you want to see the downstreams of the impact of that pull request. So what I just did is I navigated through Data Explorer, found a particular table that was of interest to me, and then you can, this is just looking at one layer downstream, but you can look deeper than that. Let me do that. And then you can also look at any individual column and its downstream. So I think that is the bulk of what I wanted to share as far as CI. It does work with DBT Core, DBT Cloud. As I mentioned, any other tool we have support for building out CI capabilities using GitHub Actions or GitLab or Circle CI, whatever you may be using. Any questions about the CI piece that I have walked through? While you're thinking, or hopefully mulling over, I want to call out we're also diffing downstreams. So you can see here, these are tables that are downstream of the modified tables. We list the upstreams. We show you if there's any changed attributes or unchanged attributes. And you can configure whether you include the downstreams in the data diff, or whether you include only certain downstreams. Building out the staging test version of the table for a CI diff, does it rebuild the full table? Great question. So I'm going to pull up. So you have a few options. So, and I think Mike, were you the one who said earlier you're using DBT Cloud? Okay. So if you're using DBT Cloud, then the first step, so I'll comment generally. If you're using DBT Cloud, then usually the first step is to create a CI job in DBT Cloud. Thank you so much, Bertai. And if you're heading out, thank you for joining. Anyone is, of course, welcome to leave when your schedule dictates that, and I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes. So if you are using DBT Cloud, then there is a integration that DBT supports that builds all of the CI tables. So only the tables that are modified in the pull requests. And there's some configurability there, but usually our DBT Cloud customers do it that way. If you don't want to do it that way and you want to kind of wrap your own approach to building CI data, then we can work with you on that. And it would essentially be, all right, thanks, Israel. Thanks for joining, and reach out anytime. It would essentially be a matter of building it just like we do for our DBT core customers, which is, I'd say, about very roughly half of our CI users are on DBT core, and we would just configure a little more custom using GitHub Actions. And there's a number of ways we could do that. So we should just talk about the specifics, Mike, depending on what you want to build. But all that really matters is that you have a version of data that you can compare to another version of data that gives you meaningful information about the changes in the pull request. That could be comparing a full build to production. It could be comparing a slim build to a slim build of production, or anything in between. So I hope that kind of gives you a sense for how we approach it. So I think I'm going to start to wrap up just because I know people are running off to their next meeting. All right, John's got to go. All right, thank you, John. Really appreciate you all joining. And yeah, Mike, we should find time to talk separately if you want to, get into more detail about how we could help you update that, or if there's anything that's not working, we can just see if there's something that we do that would work. So definitely let's find time to talk where you're able to talk to me, not just me talking to you in the group. And I think that probably is a wrap as I see people peeling off. So thank you so much for joining, those of you who are still here. Really, really great questions. Really appreciate the engagement, and hope to chat again sometime soon. So thanks. Have a good day.